Hilchos Pesulei Hamukdashin Perek Shisha Asar, the laws of disqualified sacrifices, chapter 16. It's another chapter on the laws relating to improper thought and how they invalidate sacrifices. This whole chapter really runs on one principle. And to properly understand it, let's just remind ourselves that there are three types of improper thoughts that could invalidate a sacrifice. One is called Machsheves Shinui Hashem, a thought where you change the name. The Kohen has in mind the wrong person or the wrong type of sacrifice. That one is the least severe, in that mostly, if you have such a thought, the sacrifice is still kosher. It just doesn't count for the owners. They have to replace it. There are two cases where it fully disqualifies the sacrifice: Pesach and Chatas, the Passover offering and the sin offering. Then you rise a level. Second type of improper thought is called Machsheves Hamokim, improper place thought. The Kohen thinks he wants to eat or offer part of the sacrifice outside the proper place. That one, across the board, is Pesulei, disqualifies the sacrifice. The highest level, the most severe level of improper thought is called Machsheves Hazman, where you have an improper thought related to time. The Kohen thinks he wants to eat or offer part of the sacrifice outside the proper time. In this case, not only is the sacrifice Pesulei, disqualified, but it's what's called pigul. Pigul means rejected. It's an even worse type of disqualification. There's a special prohibition concerning consuming such sacrificial meat. So it's an even worse level. The Rambam is going to tell us in this chapter that in order to reach that highest, most severe level, in order for a sacrifice to be disqualified in a way that it's rejected, the only thought that could have accompanied that offering is Machsheves Hazman. It has to be a standalone, improper time thought. The moment you mix a different type of thought together with that, the sacrifice goes down from being pigul to being Pesulei. It's only disqualified, not fully rejected. That's it. That's the principle for the entire chapter. The question's only going to be, what's considered a mixed up thought? In which cases do we have accompanying thoughts? In which cases do we not? But the bottom line is, Machsheves Hazman could only do its thing if it's the only thought that's accompanying the sacrifice. And now let's hear it in the Rambam's words. It says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Kvar Bi'arnu, we've already explained. That if the Kohen thinks during one of the four integral services of a sacrifice, which are on the screen here, Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, Zrika, slaughtering, receiving the blood, walking it, and sprinkling it on the Mizbeach. If at any point of one of those four services, the Kohen had in mind a Machsheves Hamokim, an improper place thought, HaKarban Pesulei ve'enei pigul. The sacrifice is only disqualified, but it's not the worst level of rejected. If the Kohen has an improper time thought, then the sacrifice goes up to that level of being fully rejected. But Medvarim Amurim, says the Rambam, here's the principle. When do we say this difference, that Machsheves Hazman could create pigul b'shaloi eirav im Machsheves Hazman machshava acheres, so long as no other thought was mixed together with the improper time thought. Avolim eirav Machsheves makom. But if you were to mix a thought of improper place, or Machsheves Shinui Hashem b'Pesach u'v'Chatos, or a thought about changing the name, at least by the more strict ones, the Passover and the sin offering. If you mix one of those two thoughts in Machsheves Hazman together with an improper time thought, HaKarban Pesulei ve'enei pigul. Since there's no standalone Machsheves Hazman, the sacrifice doesn't become pigul, fully rejected, it's only disqualified. Ketzad, let's see some examples of that, says the Rambam. How does this apply? Shachat v'kibel v'hoilich v'zarak. The Kohen does all four integral services. He slaughters, he receives, he walks, he sprinkles. And throughout all four of the services, he's only thinking an improper time thought. Or even during one of them, one of the four services, he's thinking an improper time thought. But that's it. And at the rest of the services, his thought was fully proper, or no thought at all. He was just spaced out, doing things mechanically. Since the only improper thought throughout the whole process was only a Machsheves Hazman, harei pigul. That is enough to make the sacrifice fully rejected. Avol, but if one of the following scenarios played out, the ones on the board here, im shachat the Machsheves Hazman. If during slaughtering, yes, he had an improper time thought, but then he did any other part of the service, the receiving, the walking, or the sprinkling, with an improper place thought. Why is this a symbol for improper place? Because the black square is like the place where it's supposed to be, and the red is the Kohen standing outside that place. That's just my symbol here. Point is, there was an improper time thought improper place thought together with the improper time thought. Or the opposite. He slaughtered the sacrifice with an improper place thought. And did the rest, receiving, walking, or sprinkling with an improper time thought. This is not enough to make it pigul. Ela pasul bilvad, it's only disqualified. Why? Because together with the time thought, there's also a place thought mixed in. Similarly, ha-pesach v'ha-chatas. If you have a Passover sacrifice or a sin offering, which was slaughtered with an improper name thought. You had the wrong person in mind or the wrong type of sacrifice in mind, which for those two is enough to disqualify it. And then did the rest of the service, the sprinkling, the receiving, the walking, the sprinkling with an improper time thought. Where the shechita was done in an improper time thought. The rest were done with an improper name thought. Again, since the time thought is not the only one, there are other thoughts mixed in. Ein ze pigul ela pasul, that's not fully rejected, it's only disqualified. It says that Rambam, all these scenarios were about animal sacrifices, where there is these four services, shchita, kabbalah, hilah, chazrika. But for who had din ba'efes of imenachis, the same thing applies to bird sacrifices and to flower offerings, where there are variations to what exactly the service is, but this principle still applies. Ein shein pigul, the name pigul, only applies, ela karban shenifsal b'machsheves hazman, is only to a sacrifice that was disqualified with exclusively an improper time thought. There was no mixing of an improper place thought, not in the beginning nor in the end. Nor did you mix in an improper name thought, at least with those sacrifices which would fully disqualify it, like a Passover offering or a sin offering. Point is, there can be nothing else but an improper time thought in order for it to be considered pigul. Otherwise, it's not pigul. Halacha Beis, let's remember that in order for any thought, for any improper thought, to be considered an effective thought, it has to be concerning an olive-sized portion of the sacrifice. The Kohen has to have in mind that he wants to eat or offer at least an olive-sized portion outside the proper place or time. So now let's see how that plays in to this principle we're discussing here. Halacha Beis, ha-mechashev ba'achas me'arba ha'avodos ebekulam. If the Kohen has in mind, during one or all of the four integral services, lechel kezayis midavar haroi la'achila b'chutz, ukazayis lemachar. He has both, machshavas hamakim and machshavas hazman. He wants to eat a full olive-sized portion from an edible part of the sacrifice outside the proper place, and he also wants to eat a full olive-sized portion tomorrow. Or he thinks those same two thoughts in the opposite order. Kazayis lemachar or kazayis b'chutz, a full olive-sized portion tomorrow and a full olive-sized portion outside. So of course, since he's mixed the machshavas hazman with the machshavas hamakim, this is not going to be pigul, only going to be pasul. It goes even further. Or he has in mind a half an olive-sized portion that he wants to eat outside and a half an olive-sized portion that he wants to eat tomorrow, or the opposite order, half an olive-sized portion tomorrow, half an olive-sized portion outside. Of course, over here, there's no full machshavas hazman at all. You need each half olive needs the other half olive. In order for the half olive of machshavas hazman to be considered anything, it has to be accompanied with the half olive of machshavas hamakim, so there's certainly no standalone machshavas hazman. Harei karban pasul, the ene pigul, so the sacrifice is only disqualified, not fully pigul. Same thing, these scenarios were for eating. Same thing if it was for offering. Kohen has in mind to offer a full kazayas outside, a full kazayas tomorrow, or a full kazayas tomorrow, a full kazayas outside, or a half a kazayas tomorrow outside. Point is, there's a mix of thoughts. Harei pasul, the ene pigul, is only disqualified, not fully rejected. However, watch this. Halacha Gimel Chishev Lechel Elehaktir Kechatzi Zayis B'Machshavas Hamakim VeLechel Elehaktir Kezayis B'Machshavas Hazman. The Kohen considers he wants to eat or offer a half an olive-sized portion in an improper place, but a full olive-sized portion in an improper time. Now, since the improper time thought is a full thought, it's concerning a full olive-sized portion, while the Machshavas Hamakim is only concerning a half an olive-sized portion, Harei ze pigul. This is pigul. No matter when he thought about the olive-sized portion of the improper time, first or second, doesn't matter. When you have two thoughts, one concerning a half an olive-sized portion, one concerning a full olive-sized portion, the half olive-sized portion thought has no significance relative to the full olive-sized portion's thought. And therefore we consider it as if the only thought that was here was the full kazayas machshavas hazman, in which case when you have a standalone machshavas hazman, what happens? It's pigul. Halacha Dalet, another variation of this 1.5 thing. Chishev al chatzi zayis b'machshavas hazman, ve'al chatzi zayis b'machshavas hamakim, ve'chazar ve'chashav al chatzi zayis acher b'machshavas hazman. The Kohen first thinks about half an olive-sized portion improper time, half an olive-sized portion improper place, but then back to another half olive-sized portion of time. There's a total now of a full olive-sized portion that's been offered b'machshavas hazman, and only a half an olive-sized portion that's been offered b'machshavas hamakim. Even though the two half olives of machshavas hazman came together from two separate parts, Bottom line is there's a full kazayas of machshavas hazman, and therefore it is a pigul. That's enough to disqualify the sacrifice. Fully rejected. Pigul, not just pasul. Similarly, another variation. Im chashav al chatzi zayis b'machshavas hazman, v'chazar v'chashav al kezayis chetzei b'machshavas hazman v'chetzei b'machshavas hamakim. He first considers a half an olive improper time thought. Then he considers a full olive-sized portion, which he divides half time, half place. So now, in total, if you put it all together, what do you have? You have 1.5 olive-sized portions. A full kazayas machshavas hazman, only half a kazayas machshavas hamakim. We ignore the half kazayas machshavas hamakim, and we say harei zeh pigul. It's fully rejected, not just disqualified. Halacha hey, let's throw in another variable. Besides for the 3 cardinal improper thoughts, shinui Hashem, makim, and zman, there are other types of thoughts, which the Rambam said in chapter 13, do not disqualify a sacrifice. Even if in action, if you would take such an action, it would disqualify the sacrifice. For example, placing bloods in the wrong place. Instead of inside, you put it outside, outside, inside. On the mizbeach itself, there's that red line that goes across. Some bloods have to go on top, some bloods have to go on bottom. If in action you switch the blood's place, sacrifice is disqualified. But if in thought, doesn't disqualify it. Now says the Rambam, what if we put such a thought, a non-disqualifying thought, together with machshavas hazman? Chashav al hadamim hanitanin lemata, liten oisam lemaila, oy al hanitanin lemaila, lesitam lemata. A Kohen thinks about a blood that's supposed to be applied on bottom, that he wants to apply it on top, or a blood of on top that he wants to apply on bottom, or any other thought like this, which wouldn't disqualify a sacrifice inherently. But then he mixes with them a improper time thought. Mixes meaning that at a different integral stage, he thinks machshavas hazman. So for example, when he's slaughtering, he thinks he wants to put the blood in the wrong place. When he's sprinkling, he thinks that he wants to eat it outside the proper time. So he's mixed a non-disqualifying thought together with machshavas hazman. Harei zeh pigul, this is pigul. Because the only disqualifying thought is an improper time thought. So it's like a standalone machshavas hazman, and therefore it's fully pigul. If all you would have had is an improper place thought, let's say during the shechita, again using the same example, during the shechita he's thinking he wants to put the blood in the wrong place, and during the zrika he's thinking he wants to eat it in the outside of the proper place. It's a pesulei, pigul. It's only disqualified, not fully rejected. Now says the Rambam, what if I didn't mix them in the sense of 2 different services? What if I actually intertwined them in the same thought? Chashav al hadam hanitan lemaila, lisitoi lemachar lemata. I'm thinking about a blood that's meant to be applied on top. I want to put it on the bottom tomorrow. So in the same thought, he has a non-disqualifying thought and a disqualifying thought. Or again, the blood is supposed to be applied on bottom. I'm thinking I want to put it on top tomorrow. Or a blood is supposed to be offered inside the heichal. The Kohen's thinking I want to offer it tomorrow on the outside. Or the opposite. It's a blood supposed to be applied outside. I'm thinking I want to do it tomorrow on the inside. Einay pigul, this is not pigul. Why is it not pigul? We just said before that if you have a non-disqualifying thought together with a time thought, the time thought overrides. It's called standalone. But over here says the Rambam, afal pisha chashav machshavas hazman. Even though seemingly the only problematic thought is a time thought, hoyil v'shina mikoim nesinas hadam b'machshavta. Since at the very same time you're changing the blood placement, harei zeh pesulei einay pigul. That's not a full, powerful time thought. The time thought is kind of wrong. You're thinking to do the wrong thing in the wrong time. If you think to do the right thing in the wrong time, that's a problem. But the wrong thing in the wrong time, not a problem. Or not that extreme of a problem. Only pasul, not pigul. Now the Rambam asks a very interesting question. What do you mean it's the wrong thing in the wrong time? Way back in chapter 2 of these laws, the Rambam told us that if you end up offering the blood in the wrong place, it's actually not so bad. It's as if it was placed in the right place. So having a thought to change the placement of the blood shouldn't be considered a wrong thought. Because at the end of the day, this doesn't affect the sacrifice so much. Says the Rambam, the Rambam is asking, since we explained in these halachas in chapter 2, that blood that's applied not in its right place is as if it's applied in the right place. So why shouldn't it be pigul? See, it should work the other way. This thought that he had, that he wants to put the blood in the wrong place tomorrow, really there's no wrong place for blood. Because even if you put it in the wrong place, it's still considered fine. So it should be as if he had a thought to do the right thing in the wrong time, which is a real machshavas hazman, which should make it pigul. Says the Rambam, it's not so simple. What did we actually say in chapter 2? We didn't say that if you apply the blood in the wrong place, it's totally fine. It's totally fine in the sense that the sacrifice is acceptable, but you can't eat it. He says the Rambam, the answer is the Rambam. When you put blood in its improper place, even though it's true the sacrifice is kosher, as we explained there in chapter 2, it doesn't permit the meat to be eaten. So if the sprinkling isn't powerful enough to allow the meat to be eaten, if you think about such a sprinkling, to do it in the wrong time, you don't do pigul, because it's not a powerful sprinkling. Therefore, in this scenario, even if later on in the procedure of the sacrifice you're going to think improper time thought, it'll only be disqualified, it will not be fully pigul, fully rejected. Halacha Zayin, we move now on to minachos, how these laws affect flour offerings. So, in the mincha, there are a number of integral stages, and once you do all the integral stages, which is the kmitza, you take the 3 fingers full, you move aside the levina, the frankincense, then you move aside the levina first, then you do the kmitza, and then you bring it to the mizbeach and you offer it, and then what remains is called the shirayim, the leftover, the remnants, which are eaten by the kohanim. Now, what allows the rest of the flour to be eaten by the kohanim is the full act of kmitza, which includes 2 steps, moving aside the levina and doing the kmitza. Therefore, says the Rambam, consider the following. Chashav machshavas zman b'shas kmitza, avalei b'shas likot halevina. If the kohen has an improper time thought while he's doing the actual lifting of the 3 fingers full, but not while he moved aside the frankincense before that. Or when he moved aside the levina, but not at the actual time of kmitza, he didn't have the improper thought. It's only disqualified, not fully rejected. You have to have been thinking an improper time thought throughout the entire procedure, which permits the rest of the flour to be eaten by the kohanim. That's the kaimetz with the frankincense. In other words, throughout the entire action, when you're doing the kmitza and removing the levina. When you put them both in the holy utensil. Or when you walk them or when you sprinkle them. But it has to be a full service that involves the entirety of the matir, the entirety of the elements that permit the rest of the flour to be eaten by the kohanim. Halacha ches, similarly, chashav b'shas haktaras hakaimetz. If the Kohen, while he's offering the kaimetz, which is an integral service, he's thinking that he also wants to offer the frankincense tomorrow. Eina pigul, that's not an improper time thought. It doesn't make it fully rejected. She'ein haktara mifageles haktara. The one type of offering can't contribute to make the other type of offering pigul. Same thing if he offers just the frankincense or just the kaimetz, which you have to do both in order to eat the remnants. But while you're doing one of them, you're thinking that you want to eat the remnants tomorrow. This is only disqualified, it's not pigul. You cannot have a time thought which will become pigul if you're only occupied with half of what allows the remnants to be eaten. Again, the kaimetz and the levina together are the matir. So if you're only offering one, and that's when you're having the improper time thought, that can't make it pigul. Aval, however, if you did a combination of those 2 scenarios, im hikter es ha-kaimetz levadai, v'chashav sheyakter ha-levina lemachar. If while offering just the kaimetz, you had in mind to also offer the levina tomorrow, which again itself is not a problem. V'achar kach hikter ha-levina, v'chashav sheyachal shirayim lemachar. Then you did the next stage, you offered the levina, and while offering the levina, you thought that you're going to eat the remnants tomorrow. So even though, again, each thought, as in the beginning of the halacha, is not problematic, but combined, hare is a pigul. Shahare pashta machshavas zman b'chol mincha. Now there is pigul, because you've had an improper time thought cumulatively in the entirety of the mincha. While offering the kaimetz, you had an improper time thought. While offering the levina, you had an improper time thought. Each one on its own, again, is not powerful enough. But now together, they become pigul. Halacha tes hiktir kedei shum min hakaimetz ima levina. You offered, not a kazayas, a tiny amount, the sesame seed size. From the kaimetz and the levina. While you're offering, you're thinking, I want to eat a sesame seed size of the remnants tomorrow. So while offering, you have improper time thoughts, but you're offering in such small amounts. But you keep on having these time thoughts. Each time you put a sesame seed on the Mizbeach, you have in mind, I want to eat part of it tomorrow. And again, and again, and again. Together, cumulatively, you now have offered the entirety of the mincha with a machshavas hazman. Says the Rambam still harezu psula ve'ena pigul. It's only disqualified. It's not pigul. Sha'afal pisha derech achila bekach ma'at ma'at. Even though it's true, you can eat, you can nibble a mincha or anything, sesame seed by sesame seed. Ein derech haktara bekach. That's not the way to offer. You don't offer in such small quantities. Ela harezu kimincha shalihuktar kumsa. So we treat it as if you never offered it at all, because you offered it in such small quantities that are insignificant. Halacha yud minchas chaytei minchas knois shahaya aleha levayna. You have a mincha of a sinner or the mincha of a suspected adulteress, which actually have a prohibition against placing frankincense in there, but there's frankincense in there. The frankincense is sitting on there, so it's a violated mincha. The chashab b'machshavas hazman kedem she'elaket halavayna. And before you remove the frankincense to make it permitted, you have an improper time thought. Harezu psula ve'ena pigul. It's only disqualified, not pigul, because it's not a proper mincha. But if you remove the frankincense, thereby making it again permitted, and then you have an improper time thought, of course, that is pigul. After you take the kmitza, hopefully, in a normal case, the remnants remain. You put the kmitza on the altar and you bring the remnants to the kohanim to eat. But what if something happened to the remnants? Part of them got lost between the actual removing of the 3 fingers full and the offering of the kaimetz. And then in this scenario, you went ahead and offered the kaimetz with an improper time thought. So now, what relationship do the remnants have to this thought? It's a doubt if in this lacking state, the remnants have already become established with regards to the laws of pigul, and now the improper time thought that you had while offering the kaimetz will affect them to become pigul, or maybe not, and it's not pigul. So there's a doubt. And as the Gemara says, Teku, let it stand. Tishbi yataretz kushes v'yibayes. Let Eliyahu Navi answer the question when Mashiach comes.